The film opens with Pete, a young boy traveling with his family in the forest. He's reading a book about a boy's adventures with his dog and asks his father what an adventure is. His father tells him it's like the one they're having now, driving through the forest and relying on the stars. Pete says that's just an adventure and it's scary. His father replies that you have to be brave when you have an adventure. Suddenly, a deer crosses the road and his father swerves, causing the car to overturn. As a result of the accident, his parents are killed and Pete is the only survivor. The boy doesn't know what to do. He's terrified whenever he hears wolves howling, and he runs without thinking. The pack chases him and surrounds him from all sides. Before they can attack, they quickly retreat when they sense a certain animal. This animal appears before Pete and turns out to be a huge dragon. Pete is shocked by its size, but it's a gentle dragon that doesn't harm Pete and allows him to. Pete touches it and names it Elliot, after the dog he read about in the book. Then he rides it without fear and the dragon flies up. 6 years later, we meet a man named Mitchell who tells us he saw a green dragon in the forest before and that he's the only one who saw it. He tells the townspeople about it, but the only ones who believe his story are the children. Mitchell continues his tale, saying he was going to shoot the dragon before, but it attacked him and knocked his rifle out. He lies to them, saying he didn't give up and stabbed it with a knife. Mitchell's daughter Grace, a policewoman who guards the forest, enters and tells the children, "I search the forest every day, so don't worry, I've never seen a dragon, so don't believe my father." She leaves and Mitchell tells the children that dragons do exist and only appear to people who believe in them. The children are excited by his words and believe him. In the forest, Pete grew up to be 11 years old. He used to chase a rabbit to save it from danger and scream at a bear to make it go away. The bear would get scared and leave, and Pete thought the bear was afraid of him, but in reality, it was afraid of the dragon. For the past 6 years, Pete had lived with the dragon because they had become best friends. Later, Pete and Elliot played hide-and-seek together. Despite the dragon's large size, it knew how to hide among the trees because Elliot had the ability to change color. Pete gave up and couldn't find it, so he decided to throw himself off a mountain so Elliot would reveal himself and save him. Afterward, they flew together, and Elliot took Pete to the tree where they lived. At night, they would watch the sky and the stars completely free and undisturbed. One day, Elliot left Pete's house far away, and Elliot sensed the presence of a human, so he decided to disappear completely. Grace was walking in the forest, she inspects it, and Pete is surprised to see a human woman because the last humans he ever saw were his parents. He keeps watching her and follows her. Grace removes the red spray marks from the trees because these marks were made by the loggers who want to cut them down. Pete sees her holding a compass, so he waits until she moves away from her bag and steals it. Grace senses Pete's movement, but her friend distracts her and tells her to leave. Before leaving, Grace opens the excavator door, takes the key, and throws it away so the loggers will be delayed and unable to cut down the trees. This is because Grace wants to protect the forest. After Grace and her friend leave, Pete goes to get the excavator key from the ground. Elliot sniffs around the excavator and is about to destroy it. Pete offers the key and a compass to Elliot to smell, but the dragon sneezes on Pete because they are covered in dust. Inside the compass, he sees a picture of Grace as a child, with her parents. He stares at it all night, remembering his deceased parents. He takes out the book he used to read as a child, but he can't read well because he didn't finish his education. He falls asleep in Elliot's arms. The next morning, Pete wakes up to a commotion in the forest. He's terrified because he's never heard anything like it before. He goes to investigate and finds a group of people cutting down trees led by two brothers named Gavin and Jack. He discovers that Jack is Grace's husband, and Grace is arguing with him about the logging. She hates Gavin because he's primarily responsible for what's happening. Jack's daughter Natalie gets out of his car, and Pete is surprised because he's never seen someone his size before. Natalie notices him and runs after him into the forest.
He climbs a tree, and she decides to follow him, but he climbs incredibly fast, and Natalie slips, causing Pete to fall. He helps her, but the branch breaks, and they both fall. Pete catches her by the hand, but she falls again, and nothing happens to her because she fell from a close place. Because of Natalie's screams, all the workers in the forest hear her, and Pete starts treating Natalie in a strange way. She asks him, "What's your name, and how old are you?" Pete introduces himself and tells him he is 5 years old because that is the last thing he remembers, but she tells him he is definitely more than 5 years old, and she is being friendly with him and introduces herself to them. At that time, Jack, Grace, and the others arrive and check on Natalie and ask her what she was doing here. Natalie points out Pete to them and says she was following him. Grace approaches Pete, surprised by his appearance, and tries to reassure him so he won't be scared. She sees her compass hanging around his neck and wants to take it from him, but he runs away and tries to climb a tree. Gavin catches him, knocks him unconscious, and at the same time, Elliot wakes up and starts looking for Pete everywhere, shouting for him to hear him. Gavin hears the sound and is very surprised. Elliot continues following Pete's scent until he reaches the workers' area. He hears Gavin say his name is Pete, so he leans against his tree to hear better, but accidentally knocks it down. Gavin is almost certain there's an animal in the forest, so he gets his rifle ready and tells the workers to hunt it down. They go into the forest to search for it, but Elliot activates his invisibility mode. The workers only see the dragon's paw prints and conclude it was impossible for them to be bear paw prints. They couldn't locate Elliot because he was so skilled at disappearing, so they had no chance of finding him. Meanwhile, Pete woke up in the hospital and was surprised by the place and the clothes he was wearing. He was so scared that he was even afraid of a balloon. He overheard the doctor reassuring Grace and the police that Pete was doing well. They believed that Pete and his family had been camping in the woods, but Pete had gotten lost. Pete heard that Natalie wanted to come into his room, so he decided to escape. He managed to get out of the window before Natalie could enter. He ran down to the street, scared, searching for Elliot. He kept running and almost bumped into a dog in the street. The dog barked at him, but Pete wasn't afraid and yelled at the dog, which got scared and backed away. A police officer arrived and ordered Pete to stop, but Pete saw a bus passing by, so he jumped on it and they climbed on. He climbs onto the roof of the bus, looks around, and searches for Elliot. When the police car appears, he jumps onto another car until he reaches the dead end. Grace arrives and tries to calm him down, telling him, "We won't hurt you," but Pete is scared of them and wants to run away. Grace hugs him and keeps comforting him. Everyone is surprised when they see Pete howling like a wolf. Grace puts him in her car and decides to take him home with her because she thinks Pete is afraid of the hospital. When they arrive at Grace's house, Pete starts to run away, but Grace manages to catch him. He tells her, "I want to go home." She tells him, "If you come inside with me now, I promise I'll take you to the forest tomorrow so you can show me where your house is. I love the forest just like you, because I love the trees and the birds. When I grew up, I decided to protect the forest." Pete starts to feel comfortable with Grace, but he tells her, "I can't leave Elliot." She keeps asking him who Elliot is, but he doesn't get a chance to tell her because Jack is yelling at her. Jack wasn't comfortable with Pete's presence, but Grace tells him he'll stay with them until she finds out where he lives. Maybe spending time with Natalie will help him because he'll be interacting with someone his own age, since he doesn't know how to interact with humans. We see Natalie teaching Pete how to eat, while Gavin and his men continue searching the forest. Elliot is watching them, and Gavin reaches the cave where Pete and Elliot live. He turns on his flashlight, inspects the place, and finds the book Pete is reading on the ground. When Gavin takes it with him, Elliot gets angry and reveals himself. They're all terrified and run out, get into the car, and start to move. But Elliot grabs the car and stops them. Gavin pulls out his rifle, but Elliot attacks him and destroys the rifle. Gavin is terrified. He sees the dragon in front of him, and Elliot is fighting him. Then Gavin gets in the car and drives off quickly.
They can't believe they saw a dragon, and they didn't know that Elliot was behind them. On the other side, Natalie is showing Pete pictures of herself as a child, and Pete is exploring many things he doesn't know anything about. He's only happy when he sees a book similar to the one he had in the cave. Grace asked him about Elliot, whose name he mentioned, and asks if it's a human being. He tells her no, and they are interrupted by a call from a police officer who tells her, "I checked the missing persons files, and it turns out that Pete and his family were in an accident a long time ago. His whole family died, and the boy was missing. We thought he died and couldn't survive. I contacted the orphanage so they could come and take the boy tomorrow morning." Natalie is asking Pete questions about Elliot and wants to know who he is. Pete draws a picture of Elliot and tells her, "I want to go back and live with him." She is surprised and asks him, "This is dragon?" And Pete asks her what a dragon is because he didn't know Elliot was a dragon. Natalie sings him an old song about dragons, and the lyrics say that the north is the land of dragons. Grace hears it and enters their room. She asks Natalie to leave so she can talk to Pete alone and asks him if he remembers how he got to the forest. Pete tells him that he went on an adventure with his family, and Grace realizes that Pete really did lose his family at a young age. She tells him that she also lost her mother at a young age just like him and wants him to know that he's not alone. He tells her that he's reassured because Elliot is with him, and he shows her a picture of Elliot saying, "This is my friend, and when you take me home, you'll see him." Grace tells him that he's a brave boy for having lived in the forest all these years. Meanwhile, Elliot follows Pete's scent until he reaches the hospital, but he can't find him because Pete has left. He sees a Gavin's car in front of him and decides to follow it. Then Gavin arrives at Jack's house and tells him, "I saw a dragon in the forest and its footprints. I followed the tracks until I reached its house and tried to kill it, but it broke my rifle." Jack doesn't believe his brother's story, and Gavin is disappointed by his brother's words. He leaves, and it turns out that Grace overheard what Gavin told Jack. She realizes that the dragon he was talking about is Elliot, Pete's friend. Elliot then eavesdrops on their house and sees Pete sitting with Grace and her family. Jack is telling them a story, and Pete seems very happy. Elliot is upset that Pete is happy with someone else and feels betrayed. He decides to leave Pete to live with his kind and returns to his house in the forest feeling sad. Afterward, Grace goes
to her father's house because he had previously said he saw the dragon. She wants to know more about it and shows him a drawing of the dragon. She tells Pete's story and says, "This reminds me of your story when you saw the dragon." Grace is surprised to find that the drawing Mitchell made resembles the one Pete made. Mitchell tells her, "I was in the forest a long time ago when I was startled by a dragon flying above me. It was the scariest time I've ever been. I raised my gun to shoot it, but when I looked at the dragon more closely, I realized it was very kind, so I backed down and put the weapon down. Then the dragon disappeared and I never saw it again, but I consider myself lucky because I was the only one who saw it." She listens, deeply moved, and finally believes her father's story. The next morning, Grace is going to take Pete to the police station so they can take him to the orphanage, but at the last moment, she changes her mind. She decides to keep her promise to Pete and heads towards the forest, taking Mitchell with her. Meanwhile, Jack can't find Gavin at his workplace. He finds a message Gavin left saying, "I've taken some men and I'm going to kill the dragon." Then Jack goes to him. A call from the police officer reveals that Grace hasn't arrived to hand over Pete. Jack understands that Grace is going to the forest to see the dragon and that she'll be in danger because a battle is about to break out between Gavin and the dragon. Meanwhile, Grace and her companions enter the forest and Pete takes them towards the cave where he lives. He makes them wait outside and then he comes out. They are terrified by what they see, but over time their fear fades and turns into joy and amazement. Elliot approaches them to show them he's harmless, and Natalie is delighted and touches the dragon. But suddenly Gavin and his men appear and begin shooting tranquilizer darts at the dragon. They tie a rope around its neck and the dragon tries to resist. Pete defends his friend and attacks them, but Gavin grabs him to prevent him from interfering.
Elliot manages to escape and flies upwards, but the tranquilizer takes effect. He falls and destroys the trees, then loses consciousness. Grace and Mitchell are upset about what happened. Gavin has successfully captured the dragon and puts it in a large truck. He heads towards the lumber mill and boasts to everyone that he managed to capture the dragon. Pete is very upset and frustrated, believing that Grace is involved in what happened. Natalie tries to comfort him, telling him that Grace is innocent. Mitchell tries to convince Gavin to release the dragon, asking him what he will gain from it. But Gavin refuses to release it, not yet knowing how he will benefit from it, but convinced that he can make a lot of money from it. Elliot screams from the sting and everyone is scared. Pete says, "Why can't they leave me and Elliot alone? We will continue to live in the forest as we always have and we won't harm anyone." Natalie tells him, "But I want to see you again." Meanwhile, Grace touches the dragon and is surprised to see that its body color changes. The police arrive to find out what is happening. Exactly what happened. Gavin told them, "I'm the one who caught the dragon, so it's my property." The officer wanted to look at it. Pete and Natalie took advantage of Gavin's distraction and entered the warehouse to free Elliot. They untied the chains around him, and then Natalie locked the warehouse door securely. He convinced the dragon to fly away, but it couldn't because it was weak from the drugs. At the same time, Gavin and his group tried to break down the warehouse door. Pete advised Elliot to disappear. After Gavin and his group entered, they couldn't see Elliot, so Gavin thought he had escaped and went out to try and capture him. But Grace was the only one who stayed behind. She sensed the dragon's presence and locked the door without telling anyone. Pete and Natalie were thinking of a way to help Elliot escape when Mitchell offered to drive the truck. They agreed, and Mitchell drove the truck, broke down the door, and drove off. Everyone's eyes are on them, and Gavin gets angry and orders everyone to chase them. He moves to get into his car, but Grace takes the key from his pocket and throws it away, so Mitchell has time to escape. However, the police cars are behind them and helicopter assistance is requested. Gavin gets a car and veers off the road, driving fast and passing them all. He gets closer to the truck and Pete realizes it's only a matter of time before Gavin catches up with them. He encourages Elliot to fly and escape. Elliot tries but fails and crashes into the car. The impact causes a brake leak. Gavin catches up with them and decides to overtake them. He drives at high speed and blocks the road with his car to make it bigger for them to stop. But Mitchell can't stop because his brakes failed. Gavin and the workers move away, and Mitchell crashes into the car. The impact slows the truck down significantly. The police cars are still behind them, and Elliot gets angry. He can fly and breathes fire on the bridge, forcing everyone to stop. Unfortunately, Jack and Grace's car is damaged. The bridge deck is destroyed, and their car is about to fall into the hole. Pete orders Elliot to stop, telling him he wants Grace alive. Elliot obeys, and Gavin tries to pull Jack and Grace's car out, but fails. Elliot intervenes and saves the car. But unfortunately, the bridge collapses and they all fall into the water. Mitchell and the others see what happened and are shocked, believing they are dead. But seconds later, Elliot emerges from the river carrying Grace and Jack on his back. Everyone rejoices to see them alive. Pete runs to Elliot and hugs him. Gavin realizes he was wrong to try to capture the dragon and decides to let him go. However, the police helicopter arrives and Pete climbs onto Elliot's back. They fly towards the forest, and the dragon flies a long distance until they reach their old home. They were upset because he was destroyed when Elliot fell on him. Pete tells him they need to find a new home far away so no one will chase them again. But Elliot disappears, meaning he can disappear and be safe. He gives Pete the story he was reading and points to a picture of the hero living with humans, implying that it's best for Pete to live among humans. Pete realizes this is his natural habitat and suggests Elliot go live in the north because Natalie told him it's the land of dragons. He hugs him all night. Then Pete goes to Natalie and Grace's house to live with his new family. Grace runs to him and hugs him. No one sees Elliot from that day on. But after some time, Pete and his family travel to the north to visit Elliot and find that he now has a family and is living with his dragon clan. And that's the end of the episode. Don't forget to press like and help us get this episode to 10,000 likes. And if you've made it to the end, I want you to leave a dragon emoji in the comments so I know who enjoyed the episode. Bye-bye.